my husband Val's favorite movies, like all-time favorite movies, are animated movies. I cannot tell you how many times he's seen Moana. Okay, Moana. Life is like a roller coaster, but it's so much better when we go through it together. Welcome to the Candace Cameron Bure Podcast. This podcast isn't about me. I've made it for you. And I'm here to share open conversations with my friends about life's challenges, celebrations, and everything in between. In this special series, we're talking about your favorite movies and the stories behind them. My guest co-host for this series is film director Andy Erwin from Kingdom Story Company. Come join us. Hey, Andy, welcome back.
Dude, this is so much fun. I'm having a blast. Thanks for having me.
I am too. It feels very refreshing to be talking about movies and talk about faith. But these are some of my favorite movies of all time. And it is a privilege to get to dig into the storytelling from an expert like you.
Well, until that expert shows up, I'll fill in. But, it is exciting. Because, we've dedicated our life to communicating stories through, TV and film and, to be able to kind of look at some of the things that were the first ones to kind of spark our interest along the journey is exciting, And I think we talked about in the last episode that, we don't get our theology from film, but we do look at things that are the yearnings of human soul that I think kind of seep through that as Christians, we can point to Christ and be like, that's the answer. That's what people are searching for. And so it's been a fun journey to kind of explore that. And today we have a fun one.
We do. Today, we're talking about an animated film.
Yep.
And it is a classic.
Yep.
It's Toy Story.
Toy Story.
Oh my gosh, who doesn't love Toy Story? Do you remember the first time you saw Toy Story?
Yeah, the whole idea of Woody and Buzz and that whole journey, I remember watching it and it was so different because of the way they did the animation and everything, but it sucked me in. And it was before I had kids. But I was always a sucker for a good Disney film, unapologetically. Yeah. But there was something about this company that produced Toy Story, Pixar, that was a storytelling on another level. And, we call them 4-quadrant films. So the ability to connect with young and old, male and female. It's very difficult to do that.
Can you tell us a little bit about the difference between storytelling with a live action feature film versus an animated film? I actually don't know a lot of the answers to these questions, but approximately how long does it take to make an animated film like Toy Story?
Like it takes years. It takes years. It can take 3 or 4 years to do it all. They'll record like Tom Hanks when he who plays Woody in the film. Tom Hanks was in between filming, I think, Apollo 13 and Forrest Gump. And was doing this in between those.
Wow.
And then years passed and it comes out. And in fact, when they were originally, kind of coming up with the concept to pitch it, they did a test animation and they took the famous scene that Tom Hanks did with Turner and Hooch, where he has the dog sidekick as a buddy cop kind of movie. And they took the "Don't Eat the Car" scene and they animated it out with using his voice from that. And so that's kind of where it started. But like to see kind of, I think with animation, it requires a lot more imagination. And I think it requires really defined storytelling.
Because nothing is by happenstance.
No.
It's not like you're working with actors live and then you're like, oh my gosh, I just found a comedic moment in that. Or here's a beat that I never thought of because the actors brought it to life.
Yeah.
Here with animation, you have to plan out every single moment, every frame.
Yeah, it definitely comes down to the script and what it has to say and the imagination to unlock it. And I think the thing that Pixar did so well with Toy Story and all the films that they did afterwards was this ability to connect with the imagination of a child. And I think as adults, I don't think we ever lose that. That's kind of the pure sense of storytelling is something that can unlock the heart of the imagination of a child, that inner 5-year-old. And who hasn't sat around and just had the imaginary world of what if my toys came to life at night?
I know. Right? That's a really fun one.
Yeah, it's really cool. And so these ideas of stories that can connect and unlock the inner child. And I remember another Pixar movie this came out with a sequel, Inside Out 2, which is fantastic. We were watching the first one, Inside Out, on a road trip. We were driving to the beach, and we're driving our minivan down to the beach. And my kids were in the back, and they brought a couple of friends. And so we put on the screens, Inside Out as a Pixar movie. And, all the teenagers groaned. They're like, oh, it's an animated movie or whatever. I swear, 5 minutes in, everybody was leaning forward. And my 15-year-old son was like, and now what happens? And now what happens?
Yeah.
Is that inner child,
Totally. Even in our home, our go-to movies as a family, it's one of two things. It's either going to be like a Mission Impossible Tom Cruise movie.
Yep.
Or it's going to be an animated movie. And even with my adult children. And I will say that I laugh, my kids don't. But like my husband Val's favorite movies, like all-time favorite movies, are animated movies. I cannot tell you how many times he's seen Moana. Okay. Moana is his favorite. I don't even think I've watched Moana all the way through, but
that's amazing.
He loves it. And, we're huge fans of animated movies. Although I have a little less tolerance, like to watch them over and over. Whereas my kids are like, let's watch Incredibles one more time. Let's put on, Toy Story 4 again.
I'm still stuck on the fact of
Moana
with Val, and Val, as a former hockey player, that still to this day intimidates me a little bit. Him like leaning in and being like, and now what does Maui do? I'm just like, that image is ingrained. That's the gift of the day. That's fantastic.
Totally.
For you, with your kids, I think there is something beautiful and powerful about unlocking the imagination of a child as a mom, and specifically for me, I'm a storyteller by trade. And what really unlocked my imagination for the first time is I was a big Star Wars buff. Star Wars was my thing. And so I was probably 8-9 years old. My mom got at a thrift shop, got a ping pong table, and she took, everything off it, stripped it down, and then painted it, and then made these 4 different sections to it, and made a scene out of Star Wars out of she made Yoda's swamp, and she made the ice planet of Hoth, and had all these different little things for my action figures to play out.
Mom.
It was a cool mom move.
Yes.
So she made this Star Wars thing, and me and all my friends would get our Star Wars figures out, and we'd act out the story of Star Wars. That unlocked my imagination. For sometimes it's just conversation, and it's just fostering how they think. For you as a mom, how did you unlock your kids' imagination to be able to kind of enter into things like that?
Yeah. Well, I think there was something easier about unlocking imagination when we were kids and our parents were kids, because we didn't have phones, and we didn't have devices, and we didn't have iPads. And a lot of that, I believe, while it can be great, those can be great tools and great learning tools, they actually stunt the imagination in many ways when they're too focused on the device and watching someone else's imagination instead of allowing it to play out in their own lives.
You're right.
So for me, same thing. I mean, dolls and action figures. I mean, He-Man and She-Ra, and we had the Castle of
Grayskull. Oh my God. Brilliant.
I mean, we played with all that kind of stuff. And then of course, Barbie dolls and Cabbage Patch dolls and playing house and grocery store and all these types of things growing up, but also being so active. I mean, laser tag was one of our favorite things to play. And we didn't have a place to go play laser tag.
Yeah.
So we legit saved up money, and you could go to Toys R Us and buy the laser tag gun.
Those.
And then you had this sensor that you would strap on over your shoulders, and it would right vibrate in the middle of your chest. So then we'd go out into the yard just like tag, except this would be at nighttime. Our parents would let us go out there even though the streetlights were on.
That's incredible.
That's usually when you had to go home. And my brother Kirk was always there. So if there was an older kid, it was fine.
Yeah, it was safe.
And then we'd be within 4 yards of the street. It's these 4 houses are the zone. And we go play laser tag at night. But that in itself is not awesome. Just great memories, but the imagination that it fosters, being teammates, having your friends, you're scoping out places to hide, and how are you going to sneak up on them, the strategy that you have behind that. things like that were always so much fun that I feel like our kids today miss out on. But, I think for my kids, I still try to do as much of that as I could with them when they were younger. Reading was a huge thing.
That's a big
I loved reading
That's
books
a big one.
to them. So I'd ask them to gather around the couch and I'd open up that book and I would read and use different voices for the different characters and ask them to read. And we'd talk about it or play it. If you read a fun book, you want to act it out and build the forts over the couch and the chairs with the sheets and the blankets and all that kind of stuff. So I think fostering imagination in that way, or, I think of that great tree house or I should say not a tree house, but the kind of playhouse that was in the park in Unsung Hero.
Yep.
When they were burning the ships and they all got up there and they, that was mom being active with the kids and just, they were using their imagination. And I remember many moments like that in my own childhood and like that with my kids. So I love imagination.
Yeah.
I'll keep going on for one more if you'll spare me because
it's
now
your show.
Your
name is on the show. You can do whatever you want.
You're bringing up all these memories because like you mentioned last week, one of the ways that I would use imagination also, and my kids did this too, was pulling out the VHS camera or I had the little Sony camcorder and start making movies.
What were the ones that you guys made? Like, do you remember any of them?
So I remember I made a music video to Batman and Prince had a song that was in the Batman Joker movie.
Yes.
That was like, I can't remember it. But anyway, made a music video in the driveway.
Tell me it exists.
It exists somewhere. I'm dressed
Check
up
your show notes right now.
It's somewhere in my parents' house on some little cassette tape. We had this. And then I got a box of magic tricks one time and weird tricks. So then I used to make commercials all the time with my friend. And so
this is glorious.
I would make basically infomercials and I'd be like, are you using this? Are your knives dull? Can you not chop your vegetables? And then I would, from the magic kit, have like a dummy finger with blood all over it.
Oh my God. It's QVC gone wrong. That's so great.
Totally.
That's so great.
And I would be like chopping the vegetables and then it's like, and I would freeze because I didn't have editing tools. So I was literally editing.
In real time.
Just in real time. So we'd stop, pause, go close up on the finger, switch it out with the bloody fake finger from the magic box, pour the ketchup on it. I mean, things like this.
That's
but
amazing.
That was so much fun to do as a kid.
On that theme, like those old videos that we did. And by the way, the reading thing, 100%. Like my wife, I'm glad that she imparted her love of reading to our kids. Like they consume tons of books. And they don't get that from me. They get that from her. And so Mandy has imparted that to our kids. So I'm grateful for that. But on the videos, so we would do we did our own Mission Impossible. We did a bunch of different things.
Yeah.
So when I went to college, my first year in college, I went to a small Bible college up in upstate New York. And they had a summer camp they would do every summer. And they'd let 500 kids come to this camp each week. And as students, we were all the counselors and the people that ran the camp. And so my brother was 15 and I called him and I said, they had asked me to do videos for the kids, like short films, because they knew we had a background in that. And so I called John and I said, will you come work for me for the summer? So he was 14, 15. I was like 18, 19. And we did, and there's nothing more honest than a group of high schoolers. So we did, the first one we did was this King Arthur Knights of the Round Table deal. And it was epic. We thought in our heads, it was epic.
Yeah.
And we did it on like $500 of, budget and then just had, the sword fights and everything. Well, at the end of it, it ends live on stage with like live pyrotechnics. And we thought like,
you blew something up.
Yeah, blew something up. Yeah. Which is our way, our music videos. So yes, that's where it started. So we got done and it gets done and we were like, that was epic. And we were like thinking it's going to be a standing ovation and it's crickets, just absolute crickets. And there was this one 12-year-old kid on the front row that goes, is that it? So to this day, I cannot sit in a screening of one of our films. You'll find me pacing the hallways because I'm convinced this kid's going to show up as a 40-year-old man And it's going to get to the end of my film. And he's going, is that it? So anyway, it all kind of goes back to those early days.
Totally.
But anyway, lead with your weakness. So, you know, the other thing that happens in Toy Story, there are these themes that really play is, you know, Woody is kind of king of the hill. Mm-hmm. And then this new toy, Buzz, comes in. And it introduces this idea of this extreme jealousy and, you know, an enviness of the new toy. And, you know, you and I work in an industry that feeds off of, you know, jealousy. Mm-hmm. The idea of comparing yourself to other people. I'm not good enough, or I need to be better. Especially, I mean, especially as a woman, like it constantly eats women alive as far as comparing. You know, and I think in that, you know, this idea of how do you handle it? And it seeps into, you know, that insecurity seeps in. Mm-hmm. And even if it's not like a conscious, like, you know, I'm jealous of this person, even if it's just that insecure thought of I'm not good enough. Yeah. And, you know, I've dealt with that at points, but I know that, you know, you being in front of the camera and behind, mm-hmm. It's gotta be something you've dealt with a lot. So like, how have you dealt with that idea of jealousy and comparing in the industry that you're a part of?
Yeah, I really have thought about it my whole entire life and really had to deal with it earlier than I would have hoped my little 5-year-old Candace would have had to.
Because you were like a 9-year-old when you were doing Full House.
Yeah, but 5 when I started. Oh, wow. And so I remember even from that age, walking into these auditions, and while everyone was nice, it wasn't about anyone being catty. I would just see certain girls in the room and I knew, I'm like, oh, if she's here, I'm not going to get the part. They're going to get the part. I mean, I still to this day remember Emily Schulman, and she eventually became like one of my best friends as a kid. And then Jenny Lewis. And I think she's a very successful singer now. Yeah. But these were like 2 really cute redheaded girls. And every time I walked in, I go, oh, well, if Jenny or Emily's here, I'm not getting the part, you know? And that wasn't always true, but you already know that as a kid and at such a young age. Man. And because the very nature, I mean, just as sports is too, it's competitive, right? Yeah. Everyone's vying for the spot. You're vying for the team, or you're vying for the one part in my case. And so you do become very aware, you become very self-critical. Yeah. And, you know, there were so many days I had pity parties for myself. I questioned whether I was talented, whether I was good enough. As I got older, saying, God, is this really where you want me here? Is this what I'm supposed to do? Is this really the talent? Did I really just get lucky as a kid? You start questioning all of that because of the competitive nature. And, you know, I'll never forget that my mom as a little girl, it's one of the best things she could have said, because as a parent, I carried it on and have said the same thing to my kids. Is she would say, honey, did you do your best today? Yeah. Then that's all you need to do. Brilliant. That's it. Not about anyone else. And I know that's easy as a parent to say that to your kids, but my mom reinforced that over and over, because I would go on 5, 6, 7 auditions a week. I mean, a ton as a kid. Every day after school, I would be going on auditions. And she'd always say, did you feel good about what you did today? Yeah. Okay. Then you did a great job. And that's all you have to, that's it. You don't need to think about it anymore. Man. And so it was just the satisfaction of knowing you did your best. Yeah. And that's not compared to anybody else. And end of story. So when I have taught my kids that about jealousy and competitive nature, it's like, you know, you can analyze it as much as you want to. Why are you jealous? Yeah. What makes you feel threatened? Yeah. Is it really the other person, or is it that you don't feel confident? Do you have an insecurity about that? I mean, you can go into those discussions, but I think the simplest answer or the simplest discussion you could have with your kids when they're younger is just saying, honey, the only one that matters is really an audience of one. So as a believer, I would say, did you honor God today? Did what you do please God today? Did you feel that you did your best and God would be happy with your best despite whatever anyone else's best is? And if you can honestly say yes to that, then that's all you need.
It's beautiful. I mean, I think if there is something about, and that's what I love about a movie like Toy Story, because it does bring it down to the level of a child.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, for me, you know, the idea also for me is insecurity is something that doesn't go away with success.
Mm-mm.
You know, there's a, you know, Woody was king of the hill. Like he was the coolest toy.
Yeah.
But it was still, you could see even before Buzz was there, like there was this insecurity.
Totally.
And then once Buzz came in, it just, his world began to crumble and he was fighting to hold on to control. And I think that as an adult, insecurity is something that, you know, the disillusioning thing that I know you've tasted at moments, I've tasted at moments, it doesn't go away because you have a success.
Yeah.
If anything, it amplifies it.
It does.
Because it's like, oh, that was a mistake. That didn't happen for a reason. And that I can't, you know, and I think that humility is not a overestimation of yourself, but also it's not an underestimation. I think it's an accurate estimation. It's like, this is who I am.
I like that.
Weaknesses, flaws, imperfections. Did I do my best today?
Yeah.
And if I did my best today, then the rest of that stuff, I can't solve those things.
Yeah.
You know, and when you're able to kind of release that and just have that just acceptance of who I am isn't a mistake, and this success isn't going to make me more worthy, and this failure doesn't make me less worthy.
Yeah.
There's a centeredness, and it's easy to say, it's hard to live because it's a constant nagging voice a lot of time, that inner critic that says you're not good enough.
Right.
But I think in this journey of Toy Story, the thing that was so brilliantly, put there is Woody begins to realize who he is and the purpose, that it's not about him. And the purpose is there. He was ultimately there to serve Andy. And again, we don't find our theology, you know, we don't serve people,
right?
But ultimately, you know, Andy was who he belonged to. And in our case, it's who we belong to God.
Exactly. And I love it. There's the sweetest scene in that movie where they are at the neighbor's, and he's like the crazy kid that tweaks all of his dolls and toys and makes them like monsters, and he wants to blow everything up. He's like you as a child. No, I'm kidding. Just the blow up.
It was actually my brother. My brother was the one.
Like puts a rocket on Buzz, and he just, you know, he's mean to all of his toys. And so Buzz and Woody are trapped in there, and they're both feeling sorry for themselves. And Buzz is really down because Buzz just learned that he's not a real space ranger.
Yeah.
He thinks in the whole movie he's a real space ranger. And then he sees this commercial and he realizes for the first time he's just a toy.
Yep.
Like his laser beam doesn't work. His wings don't really work. His karate chop means nothing.
Yeah.
And so he's really down and out on himself. And Woody then says to me, he goes, but you're better than a real space ranger. You're a toy, because being a toy means you belong to someone.
Wow.
And you belong to Andy.
Yep.
And that's what your purpose is, to bring joy and pleasure to Andy.
Yeah.
And within him talking about that to build up Buzz, Woody then gets really down on himself. And he goes, and you know what, Buzz, you're actually a better toy than I am, because who wants me? I'm actually old. You got to pull a string to have me talk. Maybe I'm not worth anything anymore either, because maybe Andy doesn't love me as much as he used to, because you're the better toy.
Right.
And it's the sweetest scene, and they both get so down. And yet I can look at that and I can very easily equate that to God and go, that's who we are towards God. Like, we belong to God, just like both Woody and Buzz belong to Andy, and they were made for Andy and his pleasure.
Yes.
We were made for God's pleasure. We were made to glorify him. We were made in his image. God delights in us, the Bible says. Like, imagine that. A God, like, my God delights in me, delights in you, delights in every single person who's listening and watching this. He delights in us, and he has great pleasure when we do things that honor him and please him and bring glory to him. And so I'm like, who do I belong to?
Wow.
I belong to the greatest in the whole universe, and that's God the Father.
That's so good.
Yeah. So even though there might not be like Christian theology in Toy Story, that's where my mind goes to, because I think they belong to Andy, but I belong to God.
See, what you just did is so, I mean, that's absolutely why storytelling is so important to me. Is what you just mined out of that, and it's able to reflect that back to God, is our opportunity as Christians to engage culture. Because there is something that does reflect the eternal in the yearnings of the heart of creatives expressing an emotional story, you know? And so what you just said about the idea of I belong to God. I mean, you know, for Woody and Buzz, the ultimate sign of significance for a toy is for Andy to write, you know, his name on their foot.
Yeah.
As Christians, God's written his name on our heart.
Yep.
And so there's an identity issue of we belong to God and we serve the pleasure of heaven. And so it does give you courage to face things like insecurity of being like, what if nobody on the planet ever sees what I've contributed, what I've done? Well, what if in heaven I got a crown for what I did and God saw, and there's a reward coming not in this life, but the next.
Yeah.
Because I serve the pleasure of heaven.
Yeah.
That gives you the security to be like, I am who I am. I might not be as good a toy as you. You know, I might not, you know, have something to give as significant, but what I do have, I'm going to use to my best of my ability.
Yeah.
And there's a security that comes into that. And I think you look at Jesus as a storyteller, had the ability to take heaven's principles that were complex to stump the biggest religious leaders of his day and bring it down to the simplicity of a child. And I think sometimes you see that in animated films like a Pixar movie that picks at that thing that is the yearning of the heart of a child that has deep truth if you point it back towards Christ.
Yeah.
So
I love that. Brilliant. I love that. Yeah. And I love that God's adoration for us will never tire, just like any toy. We'll never get old to him. It's so cool. So I just want to talk a little bit about collaboration, because obviously as an animated film, it's so, and any film really is so collaborative. I'd love to know your process for collaboration.
You're about to get me on my soapbox, so this might turn into a 5-hour.
Okay.
So at some point you'd be like, I've got enough information. I'm good. Stop talking. So at any point you need to like get the cane out and like yank me back. Go for it. Pixar, the reason why the stories have been so good over the years is when they started something that Ed Catmull, one of the founders with John Lasseter, there's a book called Creativity Inc., and it's the Bible for everything we do at Kingdom. And the Creative Brain Trust was what it was set up on, was a group of creatives that were all storytellers in their own right. They spoke into each other's stories and they breathed into it. And they brought in this idea of friction with respect, best idea wins, and would all kind of hone each other's stories in real time. And we got to experience a little bit of that on Unsung Hero. And like, you know, because you were a defined storyteller, I was as well. And then you've got, you know, and then you've got the, you know, Joel and Richie as the directors that are kind of bringing this story to life. And it was just very much a collaborative think tank. And even down to how we marketed it. And we were all on the text thread together saying like, let's think out of the box. We don't have the budget to do this. So what's creative ways that we can get the word out? I learned a lot from you on that thread as well. And I think we all, you know, kind of pushed each other forward. But for us, it really comes down to checking our ego at the door and inviting criticism early. And I don't think criticism in of itself has value, but I do think constructive criticism has immense value.
Yeah.
You know, it's more like, you know, the improv comedy. It's yes, and it's building on something somebody's doing. So it's like the idea of, I hear your idea. I think we need to work on this, but what if we tried this? And you're like, ooh, that's good. What if that made this? And you just build off each other.
Right.
And it allows it. But I think as creatives, a lot of times what we do is we hold our ideas close to the vest and be like, don't judge my ugly baby. You know, it's going to be beautiful, but you know, don't judge it until finally it's the last minute, like, fine, take a look. And then it's like, it is what it is. There's nothing that can happen.
Yeah.
But inviting people that you trust early on to say, speak into this. What do you think? What needs work? So like today, you know, we've got a project that we're hopefully shooting in February that Brent McCorkle that did Jesus Revolution, my brother and I are going to co-direct. And I was on a text thread this morning with our friend Devon Franklin, and Devon Franklin had just read the script and he's like, guys, I like this, but it's got issues here, here, and here. And these are things we need to work on. And so we've got a collaborative jam session scheduled for the end of the week for us to go through, like, give us ideas. and it's best idea wins. And it is friction with respect. It's always uncomfortable because you always have this insecurity of they're going to judge me and see that I don't know what I'm doing. But when you can check that and be like, I really want to know how I can make this better.
Yeah.
Then you grow as a creative and your story gets better. And then at the end of it, in a situation like Unsung Hero, the thing that I'm excited about is it got an A+ cinema score. And that's it's a big sign of approval from the audience. They had an excellent experience. There's only been 109 films to get that, and only 101 filmmakers. Joel and Richie got invited into that list because they really executed a beautiful film. But at the end of it, I think we all had a little bit of pride that I think each of us got a fingerprint on that final product. And we all contributed. And it's a village kind of mentality to make it good. And Pixar, Creativity Inc. is where we kind of got that principle of how much they really, put the filmmaker on the hot seat and really refine it in real time. And it's uncomfortable, but it's powerful. Yeah.
I love the collaboration process. I don't think I wouldn't be sitting in the seat if it weren't for that.
Yeah.
And so I love inviting it in. It also takes the pressure off.
It does.
Because I'm like, hey man, as long as my insecurities don't trump the fear of being able to speak them, then I just get to share my ideas. But like you said, you build upon them, but it takes the pressure off that I don't have to have the winning idea. If we can all contribute and just make it a little bit better, I think the biggest fear for a lot of us is that we just think it's going to be, our idea might be seen as dumb. And so we get scared to even share it in the first place.
Well, I mean, and sometimes in those moments, I've even hit a couple of those moments. Again, I avoid the 12-year-old kid saying, "Is that it?" But but there's been moments where I've let people read something early on, and it's not working. And one time, one of my filmmaker friends said, "Why are you passionate about telling this story?" And he asked me that, and I couldn't answer it. I was like, and then finally I had to get honest. I was like, because it's easy and I can do it in my sleep. He's like, is easy what you want to spend the next 2 years of your life on? And I was like, no. And so I shelved it.
Wow.
And so,
good for you.
So that was a part of the collaborative atmosphere as well, is pushing back, because I would have wasted 2-3 years of my life on a project that I wasn't passionate about. It showed on the page. And so sometimes it's what you say no to as much as what you say yes to.
Absolutely.
And if you have that trusted circle, it does take the pressure off. Be like, help me make good choices.
Yeah. So. That's great. Oh, I could keep talking to you about that, but I think we need to take a listener question.
Great.
Okay. Today's question is from Cassie. So Cassie would like to know, did you ever go through a period when you questioned if God was real? As I get deeper in my faith, my mind often gets muddled with questions and doubt about God. How can I overcome these thoughts and feelings? Have you ever dealt with doubt and fear in your relationship with God?
Absolutely. Cassie, I identify with your journey 100%. I think for me, I think that faith is not grounded, real faith, if it doesn't go through periods of intense struggle and testing and doubts. I mean, you look at, somebody like John the Baptist in the Bible, and Jesus said the world has never known a person of faith like that before. He commended him. But it came right after John had expressed doubts because he was in a prison. It hadn't turned out the way he thought. And he sent word to Jesus, tell us if we need to look for somebody else or if you're really the Messiah. That was a moment of real vulnerable doubt. Jesus didn't condemn him for it at all.
Yeah.
He looked at it and he just said, tell him that the blind see, the deaf hear, the lame walk, and blessed is he who doesn't lose faith on account of me. And he just encouraged them, don't lose faith. I think the God that I've come to know, and I've gone through periods of deep doubt. I think any hero's journey and any story has to have this dark night of the soul where all is lost. And I think out of that tried and true crucible comes the moment of like core belief of, no, this is what I believe. And I grew up in a Christian home where there wasn't a time where I didn't hear about God. But it didn't really become grounded for me until in my mid-20s. I wrestled with it and I'm like, is this real? And does this really change my life? And in that, as I asked those tough questions to the Lord, and a lot of it had to do with identity and worthiness of myself.
Yeah.
And I think learning that the beauty of the fact that the cross really did it all. And that I don't have to work for it all. And I wrestled with that for a while. It was like, did I do enough? And like, no, you don't need to. And
it's a hard concept
it's
for most of us to comprehend.
Absolutely.
You don't have to achieve or do anything to hit this marker for God to love you and bring you in. He did it all for us.
Yep.
But we are such a people of, I do something for you.
Yes.
You do something for me.
Yep.
There are strings attached to all of it.
Yep.
God doesn't work that way.
Nope. Because I think it comes down to like when there's strings attached, it comes down to like, I want to be able to control it, to be like, I earned it, it's mine.
Yeah.
Instead of it's a gift. And it comes down to trust. And I think wrestling with doubt really for me always goes back to, can I really trust that God's not going to let me down the way that other people have?
Yeah.
And as I've wrestled with that with the Lord, he's not afraid of those questions. He doesn't shrink away from those questions. He leans in and invites me in.
Yeah.
And then every time he's proven himself that absolutely what he says is true and absolutely who he says is faithful and trustworthy. Have you wrestled with that?
Amen to that. I haven't wrestled with the existence of God. I've wrestled with my relationship and my worthiness. But I will say that I've never doubted God's existence. I've never doubted his love for me, although I've thought of it as conditional at times. But like, I've never doubted that he's there, that he created the world, that he created me, that he is God of the whole universe. And I can't tell you why I've never doubted that, but I just haven't. And maybe it's just the spirit in me. I've always had it. But I will say, if you don't feel that way, I pray for it literally every day. I always pray for it. I want to feel God's presence.
I love that.
And by his presence, again, doesn't always mean that he's directly speaking to me or answering prayers, but there's just something in my soul that I just know that he's with me.
Yeah.
And so if you don't feel like he's with you, I would suggest that you just start praying like, God, help me to feel that you're with me every day.
Beautiful.
And I know that he will, because he so desires that from all of us and in us. And he wants you to know him so desperately. So if you pray for it, I could confidently say,
well said,
because he is there. Gosh, that was great. I think we have one more quick question from Mackenzie. What's your favorite TV show or movie? that
is a loaded question.
Okay, how about one that you've made or been a part of?
Okay. That narrows the list down.
Yes.
For me, the most special one that I've been a part of, it was one that was one of the bigger failures, but was a movie that we did right before I Can Only Imagine called Woodlawn. And for me, it was intensely personal. It didn't really catch on, and but it was where we found our voice. And, but it was a bedtime story that my dad used to tell me, growing up. So we grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, and the guy that Sean Astin plays in the film is a representation of my father. And so he would act out all the parts in the bedroom and kind of run, up and down it was a football story. And so he'd run up and down the length of the room, acting out all the parts. And so that was where we fell in love with the idea of, I want to tell stories one day. So to see that come to life through the eyes of my father, and then to watch my dad and some of the other real life characters sit on a couch and watch that for the first time, that was the audience I wanted to connect with. And it was intensely personal. And so I got to the end of it. And even though it didn't financially it wasn't a big hit, it was the one that to this day has the most meaning to me.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, Mackenzie, I would say that my favorite TV show or movie that I've been in, it's got to be Full House.
Yeah, if you say anything else, there's going to be a fan revolt.
Full House, Fuller House, they're still my family today. So that's definitely made the biggest impact on my life as a whole. So.
Yes.
Anyway, this was another great week. I can't wait to talk about next week. We're going to go into a totally different kind of film. So make sure you join us next week. Andy and I also have a special entertainment guide for you. It has some questions and prompts to help you have good family discussions about what you're watching. Go to Candace.com or find the link It's in our show notes. Until next time, be grateful all day, every day. CandyRock Entertainment, all rights reserved.